Hello, matriculants. Today we'll be discussing the poem Felix, Randall by Gerard, Manley, Hopkins. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Looking at the structure of the poem, this is a Petrarchan Italian sonnet with 14 lines. The 14 lines consist of an octave, which has 8 lines, and a sestet, which has 6 lines. It has a volta, which in Italian means turn, which simply means that there will be a shift in the poem, a change in subject matter or tone. The octave comes across as impartial and rational, while the sestet that follows shows a deep feeling of sorrow and mourning. The rhyme scheme in this poem is ABBA, ABBA, CCD, CCD. The themes in the poem are the circle of life, religion, nature, and death. Looking at the title, Felix Randall. The title is simply the name of a dying blacksmith or parishioner, that's a churchgoer. So let's start. Felix Randall, the farrier. Oh, is he dead then? My duty all ended? Who have watched his mould of man, big bone and hardy handsome, pining, till time when reason rambled in it, and some fatal for disorders fleshed there, all contended? So in line 1, the word farrier. Farrier is a blacksmith whose main job is the shoeing of horses, making shoes for horses. And as you can imagine, it's a very physically demanding job to bend or mold iron. The lines, my duty all ended. So this sad news perhaps comes as a shock or a surprise. The priest whose work, his spiritual support, which he gave to this man has now ended. Obviously because the man has passed. Line 2, who have watched. So the word watch tells us that the priest could have been present all along, watching the deteriorating of this dying man. Mold of man, big-boned and hardy handsome. The words mold of man, here Felix Randall is compared to a piece of steel, piece of iron that is molded into a shape. Perhaps the size as well is emphasized. Here we have a description of a large, powerful, and good-looking, in a rugged way, a type of man, and this is emphasized by the consonants B and H. Line 3, pining, till time when reason rambled in it, and some. So the words pining, note the alliteration. There's a duplication of the word pining, and this is emphasizing wasting away. But it could also mean yearning for time that has passed, maybe the time that they had spent together. Reason rambled. So reason rambled, he was so ill that he became delirious, or there is no reason for this disease. The words reason rambled has got the figure of speech alliteration because of the R sound. Line 4, fatal for disorders, fleshed there, all contended. So in line 4, we have the F sound, the consonant F as an alliteration. And this could be a reference to 4 elements which we believed a long time ago to have ruled the body. That is blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. The word contended in line 4, contend is a reflection of the struggle, illness that has been lost. So you have no option other than to contend with the result of the passing of the loved one. So line 5, sickness broke him. Impatient, he cursed at first, but mended. So the phrase, the sickness that broke him. So here we have an example of a metaphor. Felix Randall is compared to an object that can be broken. This once powerful man doing a very physically challenging job is no longer functioning and has been broken by this illness. So here you can think of this physically challenging, demanding job this very masculine man once did was now being challenged by an illness. And an illness that brought him basically to his knees and he was bedridden. The next few lines, impatient, he cursed at first. So this tells us that he perhaps could not come to terms with being ill and he was very frustrated. If you think yourself being able to use all your limbs to do whatever you need to do in your daily life and then suddenly not being able to do so, it can leave you very frustrated. So it tells us that he was very frustrated for a long time as he could not come to terms to the illness and this disease that has taken hold of his entire life. It has changed his entire life. So he was very upset about it first, could not come to terms, did not accept it. So the words cursed at first tells us that, but mended. So this tells us he found a resolution in the end, he found acceptance. Line 6, being anointed. So the word anointed is to smear or rub with oil, typically for part of a religious ceremony. So it could be him being anointed as part of the ceremony of his funeral, of his death. Being anointed and all, though a heavenlier heart began some. He began to accept his mortality and started making preparations to meet his Maker a while before his death. So preparations were underway while he was being on his deathbed, laying on his deathbed, and he came to terms. So he was being prepared physically, being anointed, as well as emotionally and mentally. He was preparing for his death. Line 7. Months earlier, since I had our sweet reprieve and ransom. 8. Tended to him, while God rest him, although over he offended. So the priest is explaining that he had given him all that was necessary, spiritual guidance, spiritual support to help this soul of Felix Randall return to heaven. So reprieve explains the escape from hell and making that connection with God before dying, ransom taking advantage of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. God rest him, relieved found via the session with the priest or sessions with the priest, and God looked after his soul. So moving along to the sestet part of our poem, lines 9 to 11. This seeing the sick endears them to us to it endears. My tongue had taught thee comfort, touch had quenched thy tears. Thy tears that touched my heart, child, Felix, poor Felix Randall. So line 9, seeing the sick endears them to us to it endears. So the line explains a double form of benefit, seeing to the sick. And it is explained that seeing the sick and coming in contact with them, constant contact with the sick, helps us to feel a sense of compassion toward them and at times a love. But this is not all. In this process, we become better people and we are endeared toward God and those around us. A type of humility is invoked within us. We become more loved by those around us. So this is a two-way beneficial act, as I explained. And if you can imagine that somebody that is sick and cannot see to themselves, they have a deep sense of appreciation to those who are assisting them. Line 10, my tongue had taught thee comfort, touch had quenched thy tears. So the words, my tongue taught thee comfort. Over here, we have got a figure of speech, synecdoche, which is basically meaning that a part is made to present the whole or vice versa. So the part over here is the tongue, but what the poet is referring to is that even though he says my tongue, he is referring to himself. Quench thy tears. He further explains that his physical experience and presence at Randall's dying bedside offered him comfort and ultimately acceptance of his ill health, that the fact that he is dying, accepting that he is about to die. Line 11, thy tears that touched my heart. Not only has he given comfort, but through the process, his heart has been touched. So the figure of speech personification is noted over here. Tears are given the ability to touch the heart. He has given the dying man the comfort and solace through the words he had spoken. And over here, child, Felix, poor Felix Randall. Look at how the language has changed the perspective. The powerful Thaddeus is now almost like childlike in his dependence to those who are taking care of him. The word child is a term of endearment, and the repetition emphasizes the mourning that the priest is experiencing. And as his death continues, lines 12 to 14, how far from then forethought of all thy more boisterous years, when thou at the random grim forge, powerful amidst peers, didst fettle for the great grey dray horse, his bright and battering sandal. Line 12, the words far from then forethought simply means not far from one's thoughts. The words boisterous years, the man that the priest is seeing now lying on his deathbed, is nothing like the man who was young, strong, and happy prior to the illness. Line 13, when thou at the random grim forge. So now the poet is referring to a time when the blacksmith was healthy, a time when he was working at the forge. Perhaps this was his workstation. And it was extremely hot conditions that he worked in, and perhaps like hell in many ways. Well, in this environment, he was the strongest among all these working men. And take note of the words powerful peers. The figure of speech over here is alliteration to reinforce the power, the strength that this blacksmith had in prior days. Line 14, this fettle, the word fettle simply means to organize and get ready for. In our case, it is making shoes to fit a powerful horse. The words great grey dray. Here we have an example of alliteration with the G sound, as well as the figure of speech assonance. This is the repetition of vowel sounds. So just take note of that. The horse being referred to here is a powerful horse that was used for carting heavy loads. And then the final words, bright and battering sandal. A comparison of a horse shoe is made to a sandal, perhaps of a soldier's sandal that took part in a battle of long ago. In my mind's eye, the movie that comes to mind is 300, and the type of footwear that they wore in the movie and of a time long ago. So, in summary and just to recap, the poem Felix Randall is a sonnet with the Italian or Petrarchan rhyme scheme. It was published in 1980, even though it had been written in 1880. The poem is largely a romantic self-expression. There is little or no ironic separation between the I, that is the speaker within the poem, and the author, the historical Hopkins, outside the poem. So the I may be taken as the Roman Catholic priest reflecting on the news of Randall's death. In Felix Randall, Hopkins, the parish priest, mourns the death of the parishioner, a village blacksmith. He writes about the man's death, talks about his fatal illness or illnesses, expresses pity about his death. In the climax, he contrasts the weak, sick, dying Felix Randall with his former strong, masculine self. Strong and proud, doing very physical, demanding work, making iron shoes for the hooves of cart horses. Hopkins regards the blacksmith's work as something mythic, almost divine, the creation of objects with metal and fire.